My name is Joseph Garcia, Joseph, Garcia, Garcia.
So where are you from?
I'm here, I live in the Lansing area and have so for about the last 20 years.
Where were you born?
I was born in Jackson, Michigan, just south of here.
Yeah, I know where that is.
Yeah.
Very nice. Were you raised here in Lansing then?
I grew up in Jackson.
Okay. What was that like?
I guess one would say it's pretty traditional.
You went through like the regular schooling system there?
Yeah, I went through Catholic school, but pretty traditional. I think what might be slightly out of the norm is I'm first generation American, so there's still a lot of customs that that my parents have through with how they were raised. They're from Mexico,
right?
So, but outside of that, I would say pretty assimilated family and pretty traditional upbringing.
Okay. Okay. You said you're in the Lansing area right now?
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
Okay. And you are married or?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I have two boys.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then when you were living in Jackson, did you go to school here in MSU?
When I was in Jackson.
Sorry,
well,
after you graduated.
After I graduated. Oh, I attended.
School.
No, okay. I attended Western Michigan.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Though I worked at Michigan State for a while.
What did you do at MSU?
I ran the MBA Career Services office, so I helped MBAs land jobs.
Good. Yeah. What made you get into that at MSU?
Well, I would think that it was a logical transition from a business career that I had. Okay. So I was in telecommunications industry for a lot of years. I had at that time the industry was very relationship based, and Michigan State at the time wanted to take a different approach to how they normally hire in these positions. In that particular role of a director of a career services office, and in bringing more of a perspective of business as opposed to an academic perspective, because I am not an academic.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Were you studying business then, or telecommunications at Western?
I did. I studied communications at Western as well as Spanish.
Okay.
I'm a native speaker, however, I never formally learned how to read or write Spanish, so to be able to really call myself bilingual, I really had to up my game on the reading and writing components.
Were you able to utilize those further on after in work?
Well, I currently use them quite a bit.
Okay. Yeah.
In my current capacity here.
Okay. And what do you do now?
I'm the executive director of Cristo Rey Community Center.
Okay.
And Cristo Rey Community Center is a safety net organization here on the north end of town. We operate a medical practice. We do counseling services, mental health services.
Right.
We feed a lot of people, and we do financial education.
Mm-hmm. What got you into Cristo Rey?
I guess it was a unique point of entry, but if I think back and look at the various training I've had and job opportunities, it was almost that my past employment was almost as if it was a training grounds for this work. I involve myself here because I care, and the type of services that we provide are very relevant for families, to keep them together, to help them carry forward and to be productive. I felt it was a great opportunity to help and to give back. Again, and what my day-to-day is about creating access to basic need services. And unfortunately, that's been a need that's been around for too long. And have I seen changes in that particular area? Sometimes changes in perspective with different political leadership. There's different views on how things are looked at.
Do you see anything extremely different, like as far as the community, like how the community is represented in the Greater Lansing community?
From a diversity standpoint, I understand there seems to be, you know, a much more appreciation or acceptance of differences. At least on the surface, you see more of that. I see people that are more willing to express, you know, opinion or concern. Maybe it's because I'm paying more attention to it now than I have before, but I think people feel comfortable in you know, communicating you know, their perspective, and quite honestly, I think that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. From an economic standpoint, you know, though you hear that things can be better, I know from the work I do every day that there's still people who are hungry, you know, so how well is our economics if we still have folks that don't know where their next meal is coming from? You know, how good is the economy if there's still people who are homeless? You know, how good is the economy if people can't get access to health care? I talked a little bit about MSU and changes, or the university, in my role that I had there with career services. So I'm involved in that culture, the MSU, the environment there at Michigan State, or the environment in higher education. Do I want to see it? Do I notice a change? I thought education was expensive when I went to school. I can't imagine how it is today for folks trying to go and stay ahead of that game. You know, it's somewhere in the area of $50,000 a year to bring a freshman on over here at Michigan State. I think when I went to school, it was about $7,000 a year, and I'm really not that old. So there's been substantial change as far as that goes. Okay. So I guess there's a difference that I've noticed. Yeah, cost of higher education is skyrocketed. Right. Yeah.
Does the Cristo Rey Community Center ever work with the Migrant Student Services to provide assistance?
The camp program and the migrant services on campus, they've been out here to help in different capacities, but I don't know so much if I or we have been out there as much as they have been out here. You know, the camp program there, that's for a lot of you know, first generation students and getting acclimated to school life, or the whole university environment, which I'm glad that those type of programs exist, because many of those students don't necessarily have somebody that they can go to and get some insight on what it's like to experience a university life. Mm-hmm. You know, because their parents didn't go to school, likely didn't go to the same educational levels that now these students have an opportunity to pursue. You know, and I'll add to that, is, since you brought it up with those groups, is that a lot of those are first generation families going to college. But if you compare, you know, to others, you know, many of the students will say first generation to go to college. What they really should be saying from an impact standpoint is many of them are the first generation to go to middle school, for crying out loud. You know, there's a lot of difference there. And a lot to be proud of. At the same time, too, for that particular student, there's a lot for them to learn, because they need to know how to effectively navigate. And again, now when school costs $50,000 a year, you got to get it right. Mm-hmm. You can't afford to make mistakes.
It's definitely difficult nowadays, especially, like you were saying.
Yeah.
So that's a significant change.
Especially if you're trying to navigate at a predominantly white institution as well. That must be difficult for some migrant students.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. They just don't. One doesn't know how to relate, and many don't know how to relate with each other. It's not that they're necessarily, you know, that people are trying to discriminate or or put judgment there. Some people just don't know how to get along with each other because they have no points of references, you know.
The migrants, they're not getting along with each other? Or
No,
just
I'm saying
the
that
community?
people can have differences, not necessarily from a negative standpoint.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes differences just occur because we're different, you know?
Yeah.
And that's okay.
They just don't
You need to
see
create
the same-
opportunities to learn about each other, to educate. Just as long as people can come in with an open mind, you know, there's a lot to learn.
Right.
Were you the first in your family to go to college?
I was, and our first generation go to college. Like, and my family too is like, my brothers and sisters, my siblings were the first ones that had an opportunity to go to middle school, like I said. So, you know, it's kind of where you start. And but yeah, so there's a lot of feel fortunate about that. And you know, I've got an MBA,
Yeah.
so there's a big jump there. But that's what you know, that's what a strong neighborhood and a strong foundation of community services and open-minded people and job opportunities and strength in neighborhood, the ability to own a home, your parents' ability to have a employment that can sustain the family, provide health insurance, you know, all those are elements that are necessary to make something happen.
Right. And you said your parents came from Mexico?
They did.
They immigrated from Mexico, they were married in Mexico and then came
Correct.
to Jackson in Michigan?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were all of your siblings born in the U.S.?
All my siblings were born here. Yeah.
And you as well,
Yep.
Jackson?
Mhm.
Okay. What made them come to Jackson?
I don't know.
Nothing.
Opportunity. Where they were from in their villages there in Mexico, it was. It's not like they were in middle class in
Right,
Mexico.
right.
They just farming.
Yeah, it's not like
community.
they had to get out of there like immediately or anything.
No, but it was going to be dramatic leaps for them to make a sustainable life for themselves even there. So they felt that you know, they're going to struggle. They might as well struggle in an opportunity in a place where they felt that more opportunity exists, where you might be noticed in a positive way for working hard.
Mm-hmm. And your parents still live in Jackson then?
My dad passed away about 5 years ago, but my mother's still in Jackson.
Okay.
Yep. Mhm.
So I mean, it's nice if you can visit and things like
Yep,
that.
mhm.
Are your siblings around the area as well?
Yes, I have 2 brothers and 4 sisters, and they're, with the exception of a sister that lives in Chicago, everybody else is relatively close.
Mm-hmm.
When your parents first came to Michigan, what did they do for a living?
Whatever they could. Well, and I would say my dad did. They worked. They were seasonal farm workers, but my dad actually was a bus driver and a groundskeeper for a local Catholic church in Leslie, which is a small farming community just south of here. And actually, if you take this conversation to where you have a neighborhood that is willing to, you know, to help each other out when they can. My dad, in his work as a bus driver and a groundskeeper, he worked very hard. The pastor, you know, certainly took notice and was always helpful when he could. There came a time where railroad job opportunities came to be, and my dad could barely read or write Spanish, let alone English, and he had to fill out a job application. So, being the proud guy that he was, he was kind of hesitant to seek help, but he did. He reached out to that parish priest, and who ended up helping him fill out the paperwork in addition to his application, as well as giving him some pointers on an interview.
Is this for the railroad?
To a railroad position,
Yeah, the railroad.
and ultimately my dad got that job. Mm-hmm. That particular act of kindness, which probably wasn't all that much of a big deal to the priest, changed our lives. So for me, it was pretty impactful.
But was that pretty usual? Like there was always someone to assist you if you asked for it?
Well,
Was that type of
I
community?
think that would be a good descriptor of community.
Mm-hmm.
When people are out, willing to be able to help out when they can. here where you're at located now, this community center, that's really how it was started. You know, back in the 60s, this area was very, I'll just say very Hispanic. I would say about 95% of people that lived on the north side of Lansing were Hispanic. And many of them still tied to the farming community. So all these little towns just north of Lansing, DeWitt, Grand Ledge, Bath, they were all farms. And so, which required farm labor. So many folks would come from Florida and from South Texas to Lansing to ultimately try to gain employment in these farms. And back in the early 60s, the way that people connected or communicated to where a job opportunity might exist, they would literally come to the north end of town, because this was the word of mouth. Come to the north end of Lansing, drive around the neighborhoods until you see somebody who looks like you, and ask for some help. And it's a whole people helping people type of environment, and that's really kind of how it worked. Many of the folks that lived up here, even though some of them transitioned out of farming and started working manufacturing with, you know, General Motors, Oldsmobile, Pontiac, were all here. Many were still connected to the farming industry, and they knew of what farms might be hiring. But that informal way of helping each other out existed pretty heavily out here in the north end of town. Now again, back with Cristo Rey, many of these these Hispanic families who lived up here and were helping happened to be Catholic. And just a couple blocks away from here is where a church, a Cristo Rey church, existed, where many of these folks went to church. And at some point, some of these established families went to the church and said, hey, look, we're helping a lot of folks here. Do you mind if we utilize some space in the church to keep copies of information, to have extra clothes, baby items, things like that people tend to need when they come up, which the church certainly obliged to do that, and started more formalizing this type of help that existed. The city involved themselves. They supported some finances to make this possible. Also put some restrictions on it because they needed a separate entity to then continue this facilitation of help. And that's where this Cristo Rey Community Center came to be. You know, lack of marketing expertise, they didn't know what to name this new organization. They were already in Cristo Rey Church, so they said, well, why don't we call it Cristo Rey Community Center? But we exist basically to help others, and that was true back in the 60s, and that is very true today. Over the years, we've done a lot of different things, but unfortunately, well, I don't know if it's unfortunately or not, but today we find ourselves very much being a safety net organization, providing basic needs to the community. But sorry, long-winded way to give an example about neighborhood and about communication and about how some things change and yet they still stay the same.
How long have you been with Cristo Rey Community Center now?
4 years.
Okay. Mm-hmm. As their exec director?
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
Okay. Were there any things that you did differently right when you came into Cristo Rey Community after it was changed?
Things that I did differently, I tried to save the organization because quite honestly, it was in pretty dire straits from a financial standpoint. So yeah, I applied everything I learned in business school, a lot what I've learned in working in corporate America, a lot of what I learned in operating my own small businesses.
Mm-hmm. Right, because it is such a broad, you said safety net organization, just providing general resources to the community.
Yeah. You know, many who run nonprofits have big hearts, but, and you must have that. You have to have a passion for what you're doing,
Certainly.
But there's also a lot of business sense that needs to happen too. No money, no mission.
Mm-hmm. That's probably where a lot of those nonprofits fall through the cracks, is they are more like they have the big hearts, but they don't have the ability
Sure.
to get the financial fix.
Right, and what a lot of folks don't understand, the nonprofit landscape needs to be a little bit different than the business landscape. Nonprofits need to work together. You know, we don't need to compete. You know, we're David's fighting Goliath-sized problems, and when we try to do it by ourselves, we're not we're not getting to where we need to be, where we could be.
Yeah. And you're working with other nonprofits?
Absolutely, every chance I get. And on our end here too, you asked about what I did differently when I got here, is that I reduced as much duplication as I could. You know,
Right.
to have a youth program at the center is a very wonderful thing, okay? Because youth services for youths are very important. But we happen to have Head Start just 2 blocks away, and another very well-established youth program operated by another local church right down the road. And we had a program too.
Mm-hmm.
See, yeah, it might be a good thing to say that we're doing these type of efforts, but what a greater good is to be able to not divide resources. So things that I did was that I said, you know what, we're going to be a referral entity for youth programs because there's already 2 very well proven programs right here. And then we'll allow those funds and resources to go there, and we'll put our energies elsewhere. I mean, those are just some basic things that you need to do, which is really opposite of what you do in the business environment.
Mm-hmm.
Business environment, it's, you know, you're there to win, you're there to compete.
Yeah, you're competing against other people, whereas in this...
Yeah. We're here to solve problems.
And you're working more so with the other nonprofits.
Sure, we're here to solve problems.
Right, definitely.
Yeah. There's a lot of stories to be told by, you know, folks that come through these doors. There's a lot of stories here, but because, you know, people's journeys are unique and different.